apologies to anyone who this is going to put to sleep. But I just saw the movie. Completely don't know. Andy saw
I'm
it.
in that.
You're in it.
I'm one of the extras. Yeah.
Oh wow, which scene?
In the church scene, I had to leave early to take someone to a colonoscopy, and they replaced me with a woman who had. I hope this isn't offensive. She's very curvy, and I was like, hell yeah, that's what they think of my body. That's great.
I applied to be an extra on that, and
cool.
I did not make the cut. Did they actually shoot it in Riverside Church?
They did, yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. I love that they did that there, because that is a scene right out of Suze Rotolo's A Free Will in Life, as of when she met him at Riverside Church.
Yeah, so they worked with Bob Dylan for the whole movie. Like, I guess he personally picked Timothée Chalamet to play him.
Whoa.
And Timothy, no shade to Timothée Chalamet. He gets a lot of work done between roles to look make his face look very masculine. So in real life, he's a doughy faced boy.
I was gonna say, like, is he the one person who gets work done to look older?
Honestly, yeah, he does a faux buccal fat removal thing between roles. He also had Brando style gel in his mouth while he was to help him with the voice and also the face. It was really interesting to watch him.
The voice was good, but one of my problems is actually that he didn't look chubby in the beginning, because when Dylan comes to New York, he's a sort of po-faced, and then and part of what I love about Dylan and the other Dylan movie, I'm Not There, does this really
that was a good movie,
where he's a literally different characters, like portraying different moments in his life and his creative trajectory. In A Complete Unknown, he's just he arrives as this kind of quiet, awkward, kind of a jerk genius, and just stays that way the whole movie without any real progression. He's not really ever. The only choice he has to make is whether he plays electric at this one concert, and so I was sort of disappointed by like the stakes of the movie, but I loved the care that they made into portraying things like that Riverside Church concert, the Carnegie Hall concerts, the Gaslight and Cafe Wha. It really. I've read so much about Dylan, and I always imagined what the Village was like back then. I think they did a good job portraying that, and I saw it with my dad, who was around back then as well. Yeah. And he said it felt very real.
Oh, awesome! I don't have any plans to see it. I mean, I like Bob Dylan. I even got his album that he released like 15 years ago, where it was studio cuts, like that didn't make it to the actual album. Like, I do like his songs. I just have no interest in that movie.
That's for me. There's nothing less Dylan than getting buccal fat removal. Yeah, I know that's but he was my dad's hero, Dylan, and my dad did end up as a Trump supporter. And then I was reading about how Dylan stopped being political after the '60s, and it kind of all connected for me. It made me think less of Dylan.
Right. That's kind of the first I want to say this movie. If this was made like 20 years ago, I feel like it couldn't have come out maybe, or it would have gotten way more hate. Like, I'm Not There was really the only Dylan movie you could make in the 2000s, because people by and large still liked him. And over the past like 15, 20 years or so, you've had just so much. I mean, I'm just basing this on anecdotes and social media, but you have so many people who like feel the need to announce that they hate Bob Dylan. And we become kind of inured to that. And now eventually, like, it's to the point where not enough people are going to actually be offended that you're trying to do the Bob Dylan legit movie. And
I think this was sort of a marketing campaign for Dylan's music for the Zoomers, because the Zoomers don't know or care about Dylan, and now they will. Now now Dylan's back.
Timmy Shell played him. Yeah.
It's an Oscar grab too. They're trying to win an Oscar on this one.
I do not think this deserves any kind of Oscar, although I did enjoy it.
Agree.
Maybe you deserve an Oscar.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes. Curvy extra.
But it's interesting what Fred is saying about his politics changing, or not really being I'm Not There in the first place, because this has been kind of a topic on social media where there's that Chomsky quote, which apparently I didn't realize this because I remember seeing this from way back when, but it was actually an interview with Doug Lane that Chomsky did in the 90s.
Really?
Yeah.
That was Doug Lane?
Yeah, that was Doug Lane for his zine Diet Soap, where he just sent Noam Chomsky a bunch of random questions. And as we now know,
my God.
Chomsky will answer he would answer anybody up until like the past year, where he finally got too old to just respond to every query. But one of the things he asked him, I think if I remember correctly, he like tried to ask him stuff that he hadn't been asked before, like what's your favorite sandwich or whatever. And one of the questions was, what do you think of Bob Dylan? And Chomsky, who really only listens to like classical music, said that, he heard him talking about free speech once. And this is when Dylan was...
he was referring to an interview around 66 or maybe 65. And Chomsky is completely correct. Dylan was something of a, he arrives in the folk scene.
Right.
And I think he was very career oriented. But I think he did sincerely believe in a lot of the politics that are sort of alluded to in the movie around Pete Seeger and Suze Rotolo and the topical song movement, which was, the trying to take the American folk tradition and write political songs in the tradition of Woody Guthrie about the issues of the day, about injustice and war and such.
Right.
And so Dylan was working for the topical song movement while he was working for Columbia Records, putting out political songs. But the songs became always a little bit more weird because he didn't like to just write. He kind of understood this Adorno critique of like political art and political music. Like there's a sort of relief that you get from the horrors of war and lynchings and such when you just write a song that makes you feel good about having the right line on it.
Yeah.
So I think he was very dissatisfied with this need to just write a song that tells you what you already like, makes you feel good about being a lefty with lefty politics. And so at some point he does just kind of more or less abandon those straightforward politics for more of a beatnik symbolist aesthetic, which he always had. He just like put that more to the fore. And a lot of people in the folk scene were upset at him for this. And so this is when he really makes his like a sudden break from the folk scene in those music and that music. And in interviews, he does have a lot of to say that's critical about the civil rights movement and SDS, but you can read it in two different ways. One, you could read it as sort of like a typical white reactionary, just making excuses for why he doesn't support Black struggle or the anti-war movement. But some of the things that he says sounds a lot like Malcolm X, like some of Malcolm X's critiques of the civil rights movement, especially when he's talking about racial politics. So he was a little bit more complex. I would say in general, he probably was not a deeply political thinker. He has always been more of a poet and an artist, and that is his calling and not politics. And what happens when there's a major political moment is that people who are apolitical or disinterested get sort of swept up in it and have to like sort of follow along. That's why we had so many dirtbag leftists in around 2017, 2018 who don't give a shit today or are simply right wing.
Right. No, I think that's all true. And yeah, as someone said in the chat, you don't have to have good politics to be a good artist. And I think I like his early stuff. I think the song With God on Our Side is great, but it is very much like a pretty, it's kind of spoon feeding a certain message. And it's one that I agree with and, pat myself on the back for listening to. But I also liked his later work where it's a lot more abstract and has, a political valence here and there, but it's fundamentally poetic and not trying to, necessarily push a political agenda. However, I do think as an individual to be involved in a movement or a movement of movements and then just hemorrhage yourself off from that and say, fuck you to everybody who like still cares about that stuff and kind of act like you're above it on an individual level, that's a shitty thing to do. And I think it's fine to criticize him as a person for how that trajectory. I don't think his music had to stay the same way as it was in like 1963. But I think, people, he was wrong to leave the movement because it's just wrong to leave the movement, even if the folk purists were also wrong for like having this expectation. But I just always think about this. There's an interview he did when his memoir came out like 20 years ago with Ed Bradley of 60 Minutes, who's actually the inspiration for my earring, I should say.
Oh yeah, he had
That
a
is the
couple ones.
nerdiest thing I've ever heard.
It's so great, and the facial hair, right?
A little bit, yeah. He had kind of this similar thing going on, but
It's a great interview.
it's a great interview because Ed Bradley is like, so you say you're not political, and then he just reads out the lines from, I think it's is it the Medgar Evers song or with maybe one of the songs from The Times Are Changing, and Bob Dylan is just like caught for a second because he's like, how do you say you've never been political when you're literally singing a song about the civil rights movement? And Bob Dylan's like, well, just because I was for the civil rights movement doesn't make it political.
Wow.
Which I don't think the follow-up to that was in the interview, but that's such an odd, like, what else does politics mean then?
Exactly.
I
Bob?
mean, it just means something different to him. Go ahead.
I saw a thread on Twitter the other day because Twitter's insane now in a new interesting way. It was just like an engagement farming thing, and it was, what's the most intoxicated you've ever seen a musician like live on stage at a show? And all these people were like, oh, I saw, so and so, I saw Billy Joel and he fell off the stool while he's playing piano. And this like weird MAGA boomer account with all these American flags was like, I saw Bob Dylan and he was just mumbling up there the whole time.
That's how he sings. That's his voice.
I don't think they understood that's how he.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah, especially for the last 30 years or so.
Yeah.
It's been pretty bleak.
yeah.